Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Motherload. And we are here with Amy this morning from Saskatoon. I'm going to let her introduce herself and then we will get right into our conversation today.
Perfect. Yeah, so my name's Amy Ellsworth, and I am a single mom up here in Saskatoon, so just north of where Kayla's from. And I specialize in human design. So I do human design readings for women ready to step into their lives and to really deepen their trust with themselves and to really expand themselves. So, and then I've also got a space similar to Kayla here in Saskatoon called the Veranda. So we host a number of different wellness workshops and classes. So I'm a busy mama.
Awesome. Thanks, Amy, for that little brief introduction. I know that probably doesn't do justice to how you really feel about the whole mothering and business thing. Um, can you shed some light for us on some of the heaviest parts of motherhood that exist for you, either like from the start of your life with Lou or, furthering through your journey with him?
Yeah, so our journey of starting with like motherhood and becoming a mom for me was actually really beautiful. So I was really blessed in that sense. But um, it was about 3 or 4 months into being a mom where I had this thing where it was like, I'm more than just mom. As much as I love being a mom, I had this urge in me, like it lit this fire in me to do something else or something more. And like this feeling of not wanting to completely lose myself in motherhood. So with Lewis about 3, 4 months old, I decided to go full tilt into entrepreneurship. So I think the biggest thing, like as much as it's been a beautiful journey, the biggest thing for me personally has been balancing and I guess trying to find that balance, if there is such a thing, between like business and motherhood and like that sweet spot. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The sweet
We had a
spot. I
night.
like I like the way that you phrase that. I think sometimes we put too much pressure on the word balance, and that things need to be equal. I think I don't know, when I visualize balance, I visualize like scales, right? And they're exactly equal. And
Yeah.
I don't think that creates room for like having to tip the scales every once in a while, right? Like sometimes life demands
Totally. And
more of you.
honestly, I don't even think it exists.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like for me, I don't even think that balance really even exists. Like there will never be that perfect balance, but still always like feeling that urge or that need to like find that perfect balance, even though like knowing it's not a thing in my world anyways, if that kind of makes sense. But still, you know, striving to have some sort of balance that just works for you
Yes.
and your little.
Yeah, yeah, I like the way that you said that, like the sweet spot, finding the good,
Like your groove.
your groove, harmony. Like I kind of like the word harmony in terms of like sometimes life demands more of you, sometimes your kids demand more of you, sometimes your job demands more of you, sometimes you that flexibility and like you were speaking about the human design, like the trust piece in all of that.
Yeah, totally. Um, Human design for me too has really allowed myself to actually give me a lot of space with how I do things. I'm a projector, so I work and operate in very different ways than the average person. So that has also allowed me to give myself a lot of grace. And then also knowing Lewis's human design, it makes it really a lot easier, I would say, for knowing how he operates and how he needs to burn his energy and how he shows up and just like the dynamics of him. So I think that's been a really big saving grace um, in the midst of everything else going on. Like, there's separation and divorce that I'm dealing with as well. So there's a lot of behind the scenes that are going on. So yeah, I think as women we and mothers we put so much pressure on ourselves to find that balance or do the right thing or make the right choices, and we have so much weight on our shoulders that I've really had to learn to just give myself grace and space.
And
And
how do you actually do that? Is there a
so
practice involved? Are there certain things that you do to get to that space where you can actually process being like gentle with yourself and
yeah.
trusting that voice?
Yeah, so actually how this kind of came to be was, in motherhood, like you get those moments of frustration and it builds up and you're like, oh, like when you're trying to learn something new or you're implementing something new into your life, whether it's like meditation, which I do a lot of. Another big thing is I go for walks and get out in nature, and I have a really amazing support system too. So that's really been beautiful. But for me personally, like my work is also something that gives me so much joy and satisfaction that like serving women, it just fills me up so much.
Mm.
Um, so that's kind of what I do for myself. But as I was talking mentioned before, we have these littles and we bring them into this world and they're just learning and developing and growing and we have to learn to have patience with them and we do because it's like they're just learning. You know, they're discovering the world and by watching Lou learn, that's my little guy, and how he does things, it made me think of wow, like as I'm going through this phase of motherhood and business and doing my own practices, I also have to give myself that same space and grace that I give my 2-year-old because I'm just learning and exploring just as much as he is, just at a different stage in my life. So I think when I kind of had that realization too, it was like, whoa, like I actually can be gentle with myself. I'm gentle with my 2-year-old that's just learning. And I feel like it's really important to be able to model that with myself for him to also see.
Mhm.
So I think when I like had that realization moment, that was a huge thing for me.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Granting ourselves as much permission and as much space as we do for our littles and holding that same
Holding that
amount of
space.
space. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you're right. They're just little. They're just so little. And I'm like, I'm having an aha moment right now. 18 months. I think I like mentioned this literally in last month's episode.
Yeah.
18 months is the worst. Like they're learning so much. Like it's worse for us, right? Because they're like they're not talking yet, but they kind of know what they want. There's a lot of grunting, there's a lot of screaming, there's a lot of yelling from them,
Yeah.
and sometimes from me.
Right, that frustration. It's like, "Oh!" Yeah.
And they're learning and they're intaking so much. And something that I actually say to a lot of my clients is that like you've never done this before. Like you today, parenting your child at 2 years old and 36 days old, however old they are, like you've never parented them at 3, you've never parented them at 4, you've never parented them at
So
5.
true.
And so you're growing with them in that same way. And I think there's a lot of societal pressure to like have it together. Like I've never parented a 6-year old before. I don't know what that actually looks like, you know,
Right?
but it's happening.
It's happening and you're doing it and you're
Yeah,
living it and you're surviving, hopefully thriving. But
yeah,
yeah, it's like each day you wake up and you just need to have like that space of like it's a new day and just be open, to however it shows up and give yourself some space and grace if that's what you need and not feel guilty about it. So many moms, like the mother guilt. We all know about the mom guilt that comes with, taking care of ourselves or giving ourselves space. But I think it's so easy to forget or not see like the positives that actually come from taking that space for yourself. Like I have gone through that phase and I still do have like that mom guilt pop up when I'm like, okay, I just need a break. I need to do some stuff. I'm going to take Lou out to grandma and grandpa. And it's like, oh, but I should be with him. But then when you just need that break, and you give yourself that break and you do what you need to do, whether it go for a walk or just have a snooze, like whatever that looks like for you, have a bath. And then like that refreshness that comes from it. And it's just like, oh, okay, I can be a good mom. Like I am a good mom by nurturing myself. And then it ripples down into how I am with my little guy.
absolutely. Absolutely. I love that what you said about rippling. Like when mom is feeling in general, when mom is feeling like good. And I don't mean good as in like happy, because I don't think like good and happy are not the same thing. But like
No.
when you're feeling well and you're feeling like you have the capacity to handle, the cereal that gets flung across the room, or the no,
Right.
I don't like bananas anymore, or like when,
Yeah.
and those sound like really trivial small moments, but they build up. Like that frustration builds up. Like I don't know what you want to
Yeah.
eat, or I don't know what you need, or I don't like, in this moment we're both just like blundering through it, and that can
Yeah.
create so much inner tension, because as the mom, like tying the like mom guilt together, the you never have any time for yourself, the
Yeah.
work or all of these other things take priority over you. all of that ties into this like internal like ugh,
Chaos.
thing that happens. And have you ever had a moment in mothering when that moment of rest or that bath or that like sending Lou to grandparents didn't help? And you just felt like as soon as you had him back, you were right back at square one.
So yes and no. I feel like too, like I'm going through separation, so I'm a single mom. So I feel like with like the back and forth with Lou right now, like I get those 2 or 3 days to myself where I literally have no Lewis, and I'm like, oh, like for me, it's really hard, but at the same time, sometimes when you have that space and then he comes home and it's like full on like stage 5 clinger, which I'm okay with. But it's like after having that space and then having that like right like in you, like constant attachment, I think for me personally, that's where I kind of sometimes I'm like need a moment because I'm like, whoa, I'm overwhelmed because my nervous system has been like in such a different space for the 2 or 3 days. And then he comes home and it's like full on,
Mhm.
and I love it, and I wouldn't change it, but I think for me personally, that's like that transition is the biggest for me. But if like when I have Lou, and I'll take him out to mom and dad's if I have some calls or something and get him back, it's always just like it's total opposite
Mm.
versus when he comes home like after those 2 or 3 days. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah, I think that's where I feel that the most.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
I hear from a lot of moms that like one of the barriers to them taking care of themselves is that they take the bath or they do the journaling or they do the thing, right, that they feel like they need to do. And then they get, they pick up their kids or they get home or they do whatever they need to do. And it's like they feel like their nervous system is like right back where it was
Yeah.
before they did the thing. Um and And for some people, I think, oh, this is coming to me. So I read the book Burnout,
Yeah.
which I think I've talked about in previous episodes, for those of you who've been following along for a while. But she talks about like if you have the reoccurring area of stress. So like you might not be stressed at work, you might not be stressed in your marriage, you might not be stressed dealing with in-laws or your own parents or your own childhood, like that might not be stressful, but parenting might feel stressful. And so maybe taking a bath helps you relax from a hard day at work. Maybe journaling helps you process some of that like childhood hurt or just like some of those stories that run rampant in your mind, but you're still stressed about parenting. And so we have to implement practices that actually bring that kind of stress, the parenting stress, down to a reasonable level. And so sometimes it's not a bath, right? Because that's not going
Yeah.
to
And I
help
feel
you.
Yeah, and I feel like that's something like as moms you really have to explore. Like every day me taking a bath isn't like my relaxation. Sometimes it's going for a walk. Sometimes it's going for tea with a friend. Sometimes it's like, wow, like my brain is feeling foggy, I need a nap. So I think it's really, and some people maybe it's going to yoga. Maybe you have no interest in meditation and that's totally okay. Maybe it's art therapy, you know? Like I think as moms too, we really need to give us that space. Like maybe you want to go make clay, like pottery, you
Right?
know? Like everyone's so different and has their thing. And I think too, like it's so easy to get into the comparison game of, oh, this friend does this and it works really well for her. But to be okay with we're not all the same. We're all unique in our own ways. We all have our own drives and our own passions and things that light us up. So also giving yourself that space to learn and discover what works for you, just like your little one does.
Mhm.
For
Just just like we put that same amount of effort into creating the
that
safe
space for
space
our
for them,
kids.
right? Like
Yeah.
what works for them at bedtime, what works for them in the middle of a tantrum, what works for them in the middle of a homework meltdown. Like we've taken the time and we read lots of things for them.
Yeah.
How to help my kid with this, how to help them sleep, how to help them this. And I think, yeah, you're right. If we granted ourselves that same permission, that same exploration, that same curiosity around what works for us and our nervous system, that would totally make waves, I think.
Yeah. I think a big thing for me too, where I really knew that I needed to nurture myself as a mother once I became one and really take care of myself is, I look at my friends and their parents and that generation, like moms just like gave up everything to be mom. And mom was just mom. And I see, my friends' parents and stuff and just that generation and it's like the kids move out, they're done and mom is lost. Mom doesn't even know who she is anymore because they it was just what that generation did. Like they gave so much to being mom, took the kids to all the sports, picked up from like school and back and forth and all of that. And I was like, for me, I was like, I can't do that.
Mhm.
Do you know what I mean? And it's okay if that's what you choose and that's what works for you because everyone's different. But for me, I was like, I need something else. Like, and I love doing that work and discovering who I am and lighting my soul up. Because it's just a part of me. It's like a fire that was lit within me when I had Lou. And I know not everybody has that. But for me, that was a big part too, where like just sitting back and reflecting on that, where I was like, I don't want to be that mom.
Mhm.
And not that there's any judgment if you are or you choose
Yeah.
to, but it just yeah.
Yeah. If you get fulfillment from that, it's a completely different conversation if a
Yes.
person is
Yeah.
getting fulfillment from that, right?
Yeah.
And or they're finding ways to find fulfillment in
Yeah.
that, potentially like if you've got medically compromised children or something like that where like it wasn't
There's so many factors.
necessarily a decision that you would have made but like thrust upon you kind of, and if you're navigating that in the best way that you know how, I think that's also like really powerful, and
Yes.
in whatever lights your soul, but also to just be kind of careful about not losing yourself also in
Losing
that
yourself.
role.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't mean that in like a negative way or
Oh,
anything, but just
totally.
like to like, um yeah, and I think, we're all at different places and spaces on our journeys and we all, have different things that totally light us up and where we want to be and yeah, I
Mhm.
think it's all beautiful in
Yeah,
my eyes.
I agree. I had that same fire lit in me when my first was born. I was working for someone who was self-employed, so it was kind of like I got to the best of both worlds. Like I still got like a regular paycheck, but I still got to like
Yeah.
um dabble, in the self-employment world and learn the practices and things around that. And it lit a fire in me in the sense that the mom that I didn't want to be, this is what was an epiphany for me, was that I wanted to be there for the before school and the after school. And I wanted to be able to go to the Halloween parade at daycare. Like I didn't want to be like self-employed, like working from home with my kids. That wasn't necessarily my desire. I wanted to serve people in a way that also served me, but had the flexibility that I was my own boss and I could make my own hours, which is like scary in a whole nother way. But like it's
Yeah.
that was I didn't want to lose myself in my work
Yeah.
so that I would not even know how to come home and parent my kids.
Yeah.
That was my kind of epiphany moment, and it happened again when my second was born. Similarly to you, Amy,
Yeah.
I looked at this space when Isaac was 5 months old.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, it's everyone has that different fire burning inside of them, I think, and it happens at different times. For you and I, it happened in infancy. For other people, it happens when their kids turn 15, or when their kids move out and they find that passion. And so thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. And if anyone has any questions also about human design, I'm a human design virgin. I can't even remember what I am actually.
Yeah.
I'll put a link to all of Amy's things in her the show notes, and you can find her if you have any interest in figuring that out for yourself. I know a couple of the women who are in my circles who have had Amy's services, and it has just lit up this whole opening for them in terms of how they navigate their lives and their relationships. And like you said, like just knowing Lou's human design has helped you parent him and all those kinds of things. So thank you so much for being with us here with us again. And if you want to know more about Amy, I will include all of her links below.
And thank you so, so much for having me. I loved it.
Thanks, Amy.